Believe it or not, I made quite a number of mistakes in designing the pattern for this boot. Mistakes that I corrected nonetheless, but mistakes regardless. So while I was still trying to correct some of my mistakes, my friends at Telegram asked me for how to design a Chelsea boot, a pair of Chelsea boots that has both the elastic and a zipper. So in this video, I'm going to use the mean form that I used for that pair of cowboy boots to design the Chelsea boots and put in both the patterns for the elastic and the zipper. But I also want to use this opportunity to update some of the things that I have discussed in my previous videos on Chelsea boots, so that, you know, bring it up to date and explain some things in much more detail. So the heel height of this, the last that we're using, is 3.7 cm. So I have marked 3.7 cm on the vertical line of the right angle, and then from there placing the ball of the mean form on the horizontal line traced in the mean form. Now we are going to find the instep for this boot, which is 1/4 of the last length, which was the calculation that I did earlier on. So 1/4 of the last length of this last, which is 34, is 8.5 cm. So we mark in 8.5 cm at the top right there. Then we draw a line from the heel to the ball, and then draw another line parallel to that line that we just drew from the instep. So this line is parallel to the line that ran from the heel to the ball. So this line right here is parallel to that. Then we take a measurement of the heel to the instep. The line that runs from the heel to the instep is actually called the short heel. So we take a measurement of the short heel. It came to 19.5 on this pair of last. We divide that distance into 2. The distance we get, which comes to 9.74, 9.75, I think, we will mark it on that parallel line, that line that is parallel to the line that runs from the heel to the instep. So we mark it there and draw a perpendicular line from the baseline to pass through that point that we just marked. This line that we have here is going to be the seam line. If this was a pair of cowboy boots, is going to be where the seam, the side seams of the cowboy boot will be. But this is a Chelsea boot that we're designing, so the height of the boot will be marked on the seam line. You see that line at the top right there? That's going to be the height of this boot. Now, however high you choose to have your boot is entirely your business. It's your preference. It's entirely between you and your customer. What's important is that however high it goes, you have to measure the circumference around the calf at the point where the height of your boot is, to be able to get the width of the top line. And on my feet, the calf around that area, the circumference of my calf, came to about 32 cm. So once you get that 32, you'd have to divide it into 4 and mark the subdivision that you get on each side of the top line. That's the width. Now, you know, I mentioned that if this was going to be a cowboy boot, the front line of the shaft of the boot would have been drawn from a point which is about, you know, 15 millimeters away from the instep on that second parallel line that we drew. So we simply would have basically connected it to the top of our top line like that, and basically just curve the front of the shaft like so, and you are good to go. But this is not a cowboy boot. This is a Chelsea boot, and I have to factor in the fact that I'm going to have elastic, and also factor in the fact that I'm going to have a zipper. Now, if we do that, by the time we connect the back height to the back of the top line like so, you see that the boot is basically tilting backwards. To keep the boot standing, you know, straight waist, standing at right angle, however, I'm basically going to draw a straight line from a perpendicular line from the baseline to pass through the back height and hit the top line wherever it hits it. Of course, you could curve in that line like so, and you're good to go. Despite having cut out almost 3 cm away from my calf width, that's the circumference of my calf, I still want to be able to factor in that entire 32 cm that I got as the width of my calf, for which if I divide it into 2 it will be 16. So I measure 16 from that point where the line running from my back height hits the top line. I measure 16, and if I draw a front shaft line, you see that we had 14. If we measure that, we had 14, meaning that we had a shortfall of about 2 cm. A simple matter of adding 1 cm on both sides to have our 16 once again. So with that done, I can now either use a French curve to this point, and then also do the same thing for the back and curve to that point. Right now, but using curves make it look somewhat funny really, so I decided to go against curves and just draw a straight line all the way from the back height, a straight line all the way from the back height to that point, and then clean off this curve that we have here. Yeah, we can simply, you know, correct this curve here. And then in the front of the shaft also simply just draw a straight line to meet the point where it completes our 16 cm. Of course it's 16 cm because the entire circumference is 32 divided by 2 gives us 16. So it's 16 on one side, and then by the time we duplicate we'd have 16 on the other side to complete the 32. So let's finish off the front of the curve like so. So this is basically the boot blank that we are working with. As you can see, the top line is complete 16 all the way across. Now let's do the pattern for the elastic. Because it's 16, you find the middle, so we're not going to use our seam line as the middle of our elastic again. We're just going to find the middle point on the top line, which is the 0.8 on that top line. And because I want my elastic to be 6 cm in width, I'll mark 3 cm on both sides, and then that is the basis for my elastic. Now, because of the way that this is something that I have not talked about in my previous videos on Chelsea boots. Because of the way that I want to spring the vamp of this boot, I'm going to ensure that the curve of the elastic does not go beyond that short heel line. You'll see why by the time we are you'll see why this is important by the time we are springing the vamp of the Chelsea boot. So basically, you see how I have curved the elastic pattern so that it doesn't go, it's just tangential, it's just kissing that line, tangential to the line really, and that is my elastic. Now I want my elastic to look a little bit, it's really like boring, it's just one blob. So I want it to look a little bit more fancy, so I'm adding some design elements to it. I actually sped this up. Now rather than make that just a semicircle, I use some curve right there. But in every design choice that I'm making, you can see that I am ensuring that it doesn't go beyond the short heel line. So basically used my French curves to make the elastic pattern, you know, a little bit more interesting. So rather than just be a semicircle, it's now much more, will I say, conical or oval, much more like an egg, the fat side of an egg. And then, you know, I'll use a pen to highlight all of it. So really, ladies and gentlemen, you see that we have finished designing the Chelsea boot. The elastic pattern is in there, and that line in the middle there is also going to serve as the line for our zipper. So you see, this is just a replica of the pattern that we have designed. So that's the point from where our front shaft line goes. Across the top line, you'd have to factor in the calf circumference and then divide it into 2 and use that for the top line of your Chelsea boot. So let's go into something that I have alluded to, which is springing the vamp. So these ones stay away, and let's go ahead and spring the vamp of this Chelsea boot. First of all, like you would always do when you want to spring any vamp, you draw the center line. So I draw the center line, and then now that shaft line, extend it and just correspond the entirety of the shaft line to the center line that we just drew, and then we trace in all the way to this angle that the short heel line makes with the elastic line. See that? So the middle of that angle right there. So that's the point where we will stop, and then using that point as our pivot, we'll pivot until we align the vamp point to the center line, and then we will trace in until we get to the shaft line again. Then we will use the middle of our vamp line as our next pivot point and pivot the tip of the vamp till it aligns to the center line. We trace that bottom part, and then using that same pivot, bring this down and complete the entire thing. So you see that with this we have sprung the vamp of this Chelsea boot. As you can see, it was quite easy and straightforward, unlike the other type of springing that you see that I have done, and it was only made possible because we kept the elastic not going beyond the short heel line. So when you're designing your own Chelsea boot, ensure that you make sure that that doesn't go beyond the short heel line. Now, in designing this sprung vamp, we're going to factor in the fact that we are also going to make one side of it to have zipper instead of elastic. So we add this point here and use this point to mark in where the zipper line is supposed to start. Now this point corresponds to that point right there, right? So, and that, if we basically draw a line from this point to that point, that gives us our zipper line. Correct? Good. So we can add in our lasting allowances. Just because we're going to crimp this the leather that we're going to use for this Chelsea boot, it's always helpful to add some margin of error all around the sides, at least parts of the leather that you can pull while you are trying to crimp it on the crimping board. So with that, we basically cut out the entirety of this sprung vamp. I'm not going to duplicate it really, because I could simply just place one side of it on my leather, flip the other side, and have exactly the same thing. So rather than duplicate it on leather, I'm just going to keep it one piece, so that when I am put it on leather, I can duplicate it that way. So this is what the pattern came to. I'll just show you guys that I was able to crimp it on a crimping board. It was getting quite late, so I did not bother showing you the entire process of the crimping, but I have videos on crimping. You guys already know them, so check them out. It's the same process with crimping. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave these to dry on the crimping board, and I'm going to come out and see if this pattern works. Until I see you guys on the next video, peace, and let me know if you do try this out. God bless you.